De'Vondre Campbell reportedly out in Green Bay. So what are the Packers going to do at the linebacker position? Plus, the best way to attack a robust safety market. All of that on today's show.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts. You will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Tom Silverstein reporting on Sunday night, De'Vondre Campbell is set to be a June 1 cut. Just so everyone is on the same page here. This means that the money that the Packers will save, which is significant. We're talking about $10.5 million, $10.573529 to be exact, is only savings starting June 1st. So $10.5 million sounds really great. It really does, but they don't get that money until later. And I think the easiest, most straightforward way to think about this is that's Jordan Love's money. That's money that is going to be paid to Jordan Love because he's going to get 40 to 50 million. Now, he's not going to count that much this year on the salary cap, but that's savings. You know, if he was going to count whatever 15 before, and now you can add 10.5, now he's 26, right? So that's that part of this. Now, if they had just cut him, and it seemed like there had been some speculation that he was going to be just cut. Jordan Love, by the way, $12.75 million cap hit currently. So yeah, you had 10, 22 million. Like they could get it down to 22 this year, or maybe this year stays as is. You get the big signing bonus and then the extension starts next year. Certainly a way you could do that as well. But the reason you do it now is, first of all, you give De'Vondre Campbell, a player who has been a solid player for you. I mean, it was an all-pro in year one. Has not been able to sustain that, has had the injuries. You give him a full free agent period, and you're operating under full understanding of what your books are going to look like. Now, according to Over the Cap, it's $3.6 million in dead money this year, so not very much at all. Then in 2025, it's the same number. 2026, same number. And then in 2027, which is a void year, they can put a little bit of money in there. That's about $600,000 in dead money. This was the best way to handle this contract if you were going to move on. It did not make sense to do this in a pre-June 1 kind of way. There was some conversation, I got into some conversations on the Twitters about this. Hey, it's better to just get off the money now. But you only saved $2.6 million now, and you got to eat 11 dead. Now, you got to pay the money no matter what, but you'd rather spread it out, especially with a rising cap, for a guy that's not going to be on your team. The trade-off is minimal. Like the 2.6 now is not really helping you. If you need $2.5 million now to make a deal, that you can find that in the couch cushions. That's not going to be a problem. But what do the Packers do now? Because in terms of linebackers under contract, it's Quay Walker, it's Isaiah McDuffie. Eric Wilson, who's another one of your backups, is a free agent. Now, part of that Tom Silverstein reporting is that they want him back. They want Tyler Davis back, and they want Keyshawn Nixon back. We've talked about that on the show. I told you I expected him back. I think that that's going to be an interesting conversation because we'll see what they do elsewhere. And the other part of this with the reporting is that David Bakhtiari, the new league year, is not, in fact, the deadline. Now, that's interesting. I feel like I almost want to make that its own segment. The problem with trying to do that, even on a daily show, is I'm going to get preempted. Like, I'm going to do a segment on it, and then it feels like it's going to be immediately out of date. But my top line thought is, if 2 weeks ago at the Combine, he thought, okay, there's a deadline here, and now there's not. What has changed? And is it David Bakhtiari's willingness to take a pay cut? Did he feel like he was going to get a bunch of money on the open market, and so why would I take a pay cut for you? And now if the market is not as robust as maybe he and his agents thought, they might go, hey, maybe we're willing to get close enough on this number that it makes sense to stay. I continue to believe that the longer we wait, the closer we get to David Bakhtiari taking a pay cut and coming back to Green Bay. But it would have to be a sizable pay cut. Like, he's going to have to take a $10 million base salary, probably, versus 20. That's a big haircut. Was someone going to give him 15 in free agency? Maybe not. Maybe someone was only going to give him 12. And then you might as well just stay in Green Bay at that point for 10, if that's the number. But the linebacker position, we had to take that little detour. Sorry. There are some guys in free agency, certainly you could go look at, but the guys who are going to be impact players, who are going to be like, I wouldn't even say upgrades. Like, you go out and you get Jordan Brooks. Not someone I've ever been enamored with, but like smart people that I trust, whose opinions I trust on players. Think he's a nice free agent acquisition for someone. Okay, I'm willing to hear it, but for $10 million, that's the money I just saved on De'Vondre Campbell. Do you really want to handle it that way? And you're going to go spend at least that, probably, on one of these top guys, Xavier McKinney, Cam Curl, one of these top safeties. We're going to talk about the safety market in the next segment, but it's not a good linebacker draft. How much do you believe in Quay Walker? I don't want to play in the Patrick Queen waters at 15 plus. Like, that's just a nightmare to me. And so, man, I understand why you do it. Getting off the money makes sense. But I just don't see a lot of avenues to make this linebacker position significantly better anytime soon. Like, there are some guys in the draft that I think have physical tools and some upside, and Peyton Wilson tested really, really well. And you go, okay, awesome. Is he going to be able to stay healthy? Edgerrin Cooper is a guy who's really good moving forward. Can he play moving backward? What is the Devin White market? Could you get a flyer on Devin White for the vet minimum? Could you get him for $3-4 million bucks? Cool. Willing to entertain those conversations. But this is troubling now. If your front wins and you have good back end play, this was basically Houston last year. They got really good play up front. Will Anderson was a star from the jump. They signed Jimmy Ward. They drafted Jalen Petrie, I believe it was 2 years ago. And so you got really good play on the back end. You got Derek Stingley at corner. You got these really good fronts. And so you can get just sort of like fine play at linebacker from Denzel Perryman and Blake Cashman and this cavalcade of guys. And it worked. Is that what the Packers can do? If it is, then you have to go at safety. You have to find your Jimmy Ward. They haven't drafted their Jalen Petrie. And so maybe that's the way to handle this, and just say, okay, we'll figure out the linebackers when we can. But that means going out and doing something in the safety market. You're creating a hole on your roster that now something else you have to use resources to backfill. Now, the good news is they were always going to spend in the safety market. They were always going to do something. And so this is just, if you're going to do that anyway, then it's like, okay, well then save the money later and make this move now. Linebacker has been a black hole for the Packers for seemingly as long as I can remember, with the exception of the 2021 season when De'Vondre Campbell was awesome. It's one of those positions that they have just not been able to figure out for the longest time. And I don't know what the most straightforward path is to getting there this year or this offseason. All right, let's talk about the safety market, the free agents, the guys the Packers could bring in. Kevin Byard already off the market. He's in Chicago. What makes sense for Green Bay? How can they attack this? We're going to talk about that in just a second here on Locked On Packers. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whatever you're into, speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers. And thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's now available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. So I went through and I made my safety tiers. And I put them in terms of like guys that you'd want. There's other players who are free agents that you might not want. So the first tier is the true difference makers that are out there. Guys who can come in and play at a Pro Bowl caliber level potentially. It's Justin Simmons from Denver, who could be signed at any time. And it's Xavier McKinney from New York, who just had his best season as a pro. He can play in the slot. He can play safety. He can play a little bit of everywhere. I don't know that he's your perfect post safety, but he is a chess piece player. I'll get into cost in a second. The next tier is quality starters, and it is a huge tier. Quandre Diggs, Cameron Curl, CJ Gardner-Johnson, Jordan Poyer, Geno Stone, Aloy Gilman, Julian Blackmon. That's a huge tier. That's a huge tier of players. We're talking about half a dozen guys. And you could get them in that like 5 to 6. 7 guys. I didn't even mention Jordan Fuller. Quality starters. Now, then there's another group. Upgradable starters. So this guy could come in and start for you, but you might want to upgrade. Jordan Whitehead, Darnell Savage, Deshaun Elliott. And then the wild card is Jeffrey Chin. People are really high on him coming out of the draft. I was really high on him coming out of the draft. He had a great rookie season, got hurt, and has just not really found the right home. Ejiro Evero was a very smart defensive coordinator, one of the most, well thought of defensive coordinators in the league. Could not figure out how to use that guy. I don't know if that says really great things about Jeremy Chin. So I used the Pro Football Focus, Brad Spielberger, who does their roster projections, and he's really good at this stuff. I tiered them or ranked them by their projected cost. So there is a clear top tier, and it's not, now he doesn't have Justin Simmons in his projections. I think Justin Simmons is going to get 10 plus million. Xavier McKinney, 13.5 million. Cam Curl, 11.5 million. And I think we put Justin Simmons in that group. So that's your top tier. I think Green Bay would like to shop in there. I think they would like to get one of those guys if they could. But then you have this huge next tier. Geno Stone, 6.5. Jordan Whitehead, 6. Julian Blackmon, 5.75. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, 5.3. Savage, 5. Fuller, 4.6. Elliott, 4. And now we get into like the 3 million Aloy Gilman, 3.75. Mike Edwards, 3.5. Jeremy Chin, 3. Tashawn Gibson, another one of those upgradable starters I didn't put in the original list, 2.5. 2.5. That's nothing. That's nothing. I mean, you could realistically, for the money that it would cost to extend, like if you were going to trade for L'Jarius Sneed, then you got to pay him 20, 21, 22. Well, you could sign Xavier McKinney and Jordan Fuller and Tashaun Gibson and probably spend less money. You could have starting safeties and a really, really high level backup safety for what it would cost for one corner. Now, one really, really good corner. But that's just when you're talking about roster construction, trying to find ways to build this. It's also why, because the top of the market is not, Calvin Ridley is probably going to get 17 million plus on the open market. T. Higgins is going to get 20. That's a huge number. 13.5 is not a huge number. That's like fine to good tight end money. That is starting, but not anything that good receiver money. To get the top safety on the market, to get a 24-year-old who is just coming into his own. Or a player like Cam Curl, who is just, he is this year's Adrian Amos. Just rock solid. You could get one of those guys and another one of those mid-level guys and still be spending under $20 million. That's the David Bakhtiari money. Right there. That's the savings. You could sign Julian Blackmon and Xavier McKinney and not get to 20 million APY. And remember, all the money is fungible, it's movable, it's fake. So, I like the idea the salary cap is real, but contracts are fake. Salary cap's kind of fake too. But all of these guys being right in that range tells me that maybe none of those guys can command that kind of money. Because it's like, okay, if I could sign Xavier McKinney for 13.5, well, I could just sign Cam Curl for 11. But why spend that money on Cam Curl when I could get Geno Stone for 6.5? Or Julian Blackmon for 5 and change? Or Darnell Savage for 5? He's not coming back to Green Bay, but you understand what we're doing here. It makes sense for the Packers to spend on multiple safeties because they can. This is not Preston and Darius Smith when you're having to hand out, $200+ million in total contracts. We're talking about less than $40 million maybe, depending on the kind of years you're looking at. I mean, 3 years, 13 for Xavier McKinney. That gets you to 40. You could be less than 50, certainly less than 60. And that's total contract value. The odds of these guys seeing year 3, year 4 of these contracts, pretty low, just generally. So you can double dip. You could triple dip. It's why I don't really see, there have been some conversations it's Xavier McKinney but the thing is, or what? You could do Jordan Whitehead and Julian Blackmon and it's 12 million, or Xavier McKinney for 13.5. The thing is, you could do both of those things. You can do both. You could get Xavier McKinney and one of those other guys because the top of the market is just, we're talking about a different price point for these guys. So to me, it makes sense to be willing to play at the top of this market because the top of the safety market is just not as robust as it is other places. You're not paying the same premium because the league just doesn't care that much. But for someone like McKinney and Simmons in particular, I would be I like Cam Curl on the Adrian Amos deal plus inflation. That's what I would like. If he's going to get a bunch more than that, 4 years, 36 was that original Amos deal. So that's $9 million per. Is 11.5 that deal plus inflation? Now that deal was 2019. So maybe it is with the cap going up the way it is. Yeah, I guess it is probably. Seems like a lot. 3 years, 35. Can you do that? 3 years, 34 and a half. Does he want a 4-year deal? Fine. I mean, gives you more opportunities to spread the money out if you get a good player. But that's my point. If 11 and a half is the Adrian Amos deal adjusted for inflation, and you can get Xavier McKinney, who is a young, talented player who can play the post, can play in the slot, can play deep half. I'm paying slightly more than the Adrian Amos deal plus inflation to get that. A player that cashes out ultimately in what I think can be a more impactful kind of player. And that's with all due respect to Adrian Amos, who was a really good player in Green Bay. He was a really good player in Chicago, an underrated player in Chicago, underrated by the fans, underrated by the media, underrated by the team themselves. I heard the criticisms of him. We knew why the team was moving on. Didn't make enough plays. Made a ton of plays in Green Bay, especially those first couple seasons. You can do both. Now, it does raise the question, does it make the most sense to sign that high priority free agent? Xavier McKinney, Justin Simmons, Cam Curl. But to me, Xavier McKinney, Justin Simmons. That's your true different maker tier. Get one of those guys. And then go into the draft and go, let's just throw DB draft picks at the wall and sign Tayshaun Gibson for $2.5 million. Sign even like Mike Edwards, 3.5. If Jordan Fuller's only 4, like that, 4.5, that makes a ton of sense. You don't even have to play in that mid-level. Just get a guy who you go, okay, if the rookie's not ready to go, we know this guy can do it. There's a ton of value in that. The thing is like, what's $2 million? Like, I think Tayshaun Gibson is the okay, you didn't get anyone first wave or second wave, and now third wave, you got to go get this guy. But maybe you just sign him straight away. Hey, come play for $2.5 million. Come try and win a Super Bowl in Green Bay, and we'll see what happens. And you're trying to get Justin Simmons, you're trying to get Xavier McKinney, you're trying to get these top level players, but you know in-house you've got a guy that you know can play. Is he gonna make an all-pro team? No. But does he know your defense? Is he gonna play hard? Is he gonna communicate well? Is he gonna give you solid play? Yeah. And is he gonna make it easy for you in the draft to just go, we can take whoever we want? Yeah. Yeah. And there is its own kind of value in that as well. All right. A mock draft Monday. We do it in just a second here on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. You don't want to be stuck going, oh, my bracket. Oh, my bracket. No, you bet on the individual games and then those buzzer beaters, those upsets, those comebacks, those free throws at the end of the game. Oh, it's the bonus. Oh, no, double bonus. Here we go. That's where the excitement is, and you don't have to worry. Oh, am I going to win my pool? Who cares? You can win money on just that game. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Do it. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. And thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, mock draft Monday, baby. I understand the frustration with the offensive line stuff. That being said, when I did this mock, I tweeted out the screenshot At my pick, I had Troy Fautanu, Graham Barton, and Amarius Mims all on the board. And if this were real life, I would have expect the Packers to have drafted Fautanu. But I wanted to have a different conversation because I drafted an offensive lineman later and I want to talk about it. So at 25, an oldie but a goodie. Everything that is old is new. KoolAid McKinstry. This was a popular selection for the Packers for a while. Then he sort of flew under the radar. Came into the combine shorter than he was listed. I think it was 5'11" and change. He's listed at 6'1" at Alabama. Did not test. So we do not have an athletic profile on him, but we're talking about a former 5-star, a former absolute blue, like purple chip recruit. Everyone knew this guy was coming. And he can play press, he can play man, he can play zone. He's got great feeling coverage. His effort, sometimes you're like, yeah, he's a 5-star. Like he gives effort in run defense like a 5-star. But the movement skills, the coverage ability. Eric Crocker, our pal over at Locked On 49ers, formerly of Locked On NFL Draft and formerly of the NFL, formerly a professional defensive back, has McKinstry cornerback 1 over Terrion Arnold, his teammate, over Quinion Mitchell at Toledo, over Cooper DeJean, over Nate Wiggins. He has KoolAid CB1 in this draft. I just wanted to give it a little bit of different flavor. I'm not doing the thing where I'm like, hey, see, look, I'm not predicting this right now. We do not have an athletic profile on him, but I wanted to get a chance to talk about him because I do think he's gotten a little forgotten in all of this. I think he is an early second, late first kind of talent. In this draft, I think the Packers will have a chance to pick a player that they have a first-round grade on at 25. They did in the mock, but I wanted to have a different conversation. So here we are. At 41, I feel like if you gave me Kamari Lassiter, Tyke Smith, and Javon Bullard, and then the field of defensive backs, I might take the Georgia group. Because Lassiter ended up testing really, really well. The agilities were awesome. Bullard ran fast. Tyke Smith, Bullard is the perfect Packer for this defense because he played in the slot, so you could try him in the slot. And then he moved deep. And there were plenty of times, and in fact, some of my favorite Bullard plays, he's the guy I drafted at 41, the Georgia safety, corner, defensive back. He is lined up in the slot, and you go, okay, he's going to play in the slot. And then it actually becomes a too high shell, and he's the safety. And there's just a lot of different things you can do for him. He comes up, he tackles. He's not the biggest guy. I think he's like 5 pounds heavier than Darnell Savage was at the same height and ran 4.4s. So he's not the premium athlete, but the tape is really good. It's really solid. He is someone that is just a perfect fit for what this defense wants to be. And he is someone I'd be really excited about for Green Bay. At 58, someone we've talked about at 25, at 41. He's still in the top. I think he's still in the top 30 on Daniel Jeremiah's big board. Edgerrin Cooper, the linebacker from Texas A&M. The opinions seem to be all over the place on this guy. And I can understand why, because of the very specific things he was asked to do. Now, there's been some conversations, some reporting that, he can move backward laterally better than he's asked to do. That's just hey, this is what you were asked to do at Texas A&M. That's a risk. That's a leap of faith. Could he just come in and be your base down Sam linebacker from the jump? Maybe. Or maybe you're moving on from De'Vondre Campbell. I feel like they need to have a linebacker in their pocket, whether it's Junior Colson, whether it's Jeremiah Trotter, whether it's, there's a couple other guys, Peyton Wilson, that they feel like these are guys that they feel good about. Cooper is the one I'd make the bet on. The length, the size, the explosiveness, coming downhill, the pass rush juice. There's a useful place in him on every defense. The question is, can he get there from a read and react standpoint, from a coverage standpoint? In fact, I think there are some similarities here with Jordan Brooks. He got there on a coverage, from a coverage perspective, to be a solid player. I think that's kind of what you're looking at here with Cooper. At 88, someone who I would be surprised if he's there at 88, honestly. Patrick Paul, the tackle from Houston, and you may be going, who? He has, I think, 36-inch arms, absolutely huge, tested really, really well, relative athletic score over 9. This is the kind of guy that you developmental tackle prospect. He becomes your swing tackle day one, and someone who in a year or sooner, but a year or two, you're grooming to be your future left tackle. And he has stud left tackle position versatility. He could do it. Has that kind of physical upside, that kind of physical ability. At 91, another offensive lineman, Christian Mahogany, played for Jeff Hafley. He's a guard. They don't usually draft guards to play guard, although they did it with Elton Jenkins, and that works pretty well. I wonder if he's a guard who they could let compete at guard, but then also let compete at center. Hafley would be the kind of guy that would know, is he smart enough to handle the protection calls, to handle that kind of stuff? Does he have the awareness to do stuff like that? Like, is there more to his game? You saw him in practice every day. Like, the Packers would have the inside info there. And so I would really like that. It's not a perfect prospect by any means. That's why he's there at 91, but he tested really well. Relative athletic score over 9, and he is nasty. He is nasty. As a puller, he wants to end people. So I would like that in Green Bay. A road grader, I think that'd be really fun. So this is a different look. And these boards are going to be ever changing. I'm going to try and find different interesting ways to do this, just so we can look at what different options could look like. And then as we get closer to the draft, we'll hone in on what the players who make the most sense, the positions that make the most sense, the shape of the draft, all that good stuff. All right. We were going to be going live if we get David Bakhtiari news, if we get a big-time free agent signing. I'll have some social media reactions to smaller signings. Like if they sign Tayshaun Gibson, we're not going to go live. But social. So follow Instagram, YouTube Shorts. Go subscribe on YouTube, Facebook, all those places. You will see instant reactions to all that stuff, of course, on Twitter as well. And so that's the plan this week. Big moves. We'll go live if we can. I'm traveling on Thursday, so we'll see. I have some obligations on Friday, so we'll see. But I'm going to do my best. You will always get my instant reactions to everything on socials, on videos, shorts, those kinds of things. We just may have to postpone lives in some cases. We'll see how helpful the Packers want to be to my schedule. If you get it all done in the tampering period, making my job very easy. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all those good places, so you can stay Locked On Packers.